Welcome and thank you so much for coming to the Wellesley League of Voters How to Run event. My name is Jen Fallon and I'm the Vice President of Voter Services here, and with my co-trustee Voter Services person here who's not on camera is Lucy. We've been putting forward this event for you, as the League does every year, to help anyone who's interested in running for town government in Wellesley. I wanted to thank our board members who are here tonight. We've got Laura and Bonnie, and we've got Marguerite and Mara and Eri. And I'm going to introduce our panel in just a minute, but I want to just bring up a few Wellesley town government facts, just to kind of set the stage. Wellesley became a self-government form from a special act of the Mass General Court in 1881, and we had a town meeting form of government then. But it was the town meeting form where anyone could show up. And you know what happened? We got too many people in town. So starting in 1932, we went to a representative form of government. And that was where you had to be elected from your precinct, and only those representatives are able to vote. So that's where we currently are today. We have A through H precincts, and we have 30 people per precinct. So of our town of almost 30,000 people, that's 240 people who are helping to determine the rules and the laws of our town. So it really just goes to show how important it is if you're able to help out with Wellesley, because we have an extremely decentralized form of government. Our select board, which is made up of 5 volunteer men and women in town, are the chief executive of the town. We also have an executive director of general government services who is a staff person paid. They do not run for this position. Her name is Megan Jopp. She is brilliant. She's considered the chief executive officer of the town. And then town meeting, which I mentioned earlier, the 240 people who are elected to 3-year terms are the legislative body. So really, anyone in town, there's actually no age limit, I learned, can become a town meeting member. And I have been one since 2017, and I'm really hoping that in addition to learning about the boards that our panel is on, we can help spark some interest in running for town meeting. Just a little side story. When I ran, there were 20 of us running for 10 positions in town. I'm in precinct H. It's an extremely competitive precinct. I have friends who say to me, I joined town meeting. I think that means that they're in a precinct with not as much interest. So it really varies upon your precinct. But what we're going to do today is just do a little walkthrough of how you can pull papers, which is a term you're going to hear us use, to be able to run. And then we're going to have a lovely discussion with our panel, who will share with us a little more information about what they do. And what we're going to just briefly go through, and this presentation will also be available on the homepage of the League of Women Voters of Wellesley. What we want to just make a plea. If you are interested, please come and help Wellesley run. And how do you do that? We have a series of elected offices in town. In addition to town meeting, which I mentioned, as you can see here, we have a variety of boards. And really, what happens is traditionally people who are perhaps a doctor might run for Board of Health. You're going to look to see where your interests lie. And you can see the seats that are up for the election this year. Big thanks to Miss Casey Cato, who put this all together. And if you need to be a resident or a registered voter for these positions. So you can see all the way down from that executive board of the select board to you've got the moderator who runs town meeting, library, planning, recreation. So there's a variety of boards in town. And what I love is I've heard the moderator call this nighttime government. So this is the nighttime government that helps our town work. So we have more information that I'm going to point everyone to, which is our candidate handbook. It goes into much more detail that will tell you about these individual boards. Our wonderful board member, Eri Johnson, put this together with her team. So I'm not going to get into too deep a level on that tonight, but it's a really thorough walkthrough. These are the 8 precincts that we have in town, and we've got maps at Town Hall, we've got maps online, so if you don't know your precinct, you can look it up, but it does tie into where you vote. So it's pretty straightforward. And as you can see here, these are the town meeting members by precinct A through H. And I'm just going to try to dispel a little concern. People will say, oh, I don't have time. Oh, I'm so busy, which I totally understand. I have a job, I have 2 kids, I have a husband, I have a dog myself. But when you think about town meeting, you're going to think about maybe a special town meeting in the fall, which we just had, that was, I believe, 3 nights. And then you're going to have your annual town meeting, which is in the spring. It's in the late March area. Traditionally, that's going to go maybe 4 to 6 nights. The moderator keeps it from, say, 7 to 10 p.m. And that is the lift that you're going to be asked to do once a year. There will be documentation that you will be asked to read that most likely you're interested in reading. It's going to talk about the water in your town, your taxes, your schools, information that you're most likely interested in as a Wellesley resident. And that is the lift of town meeting. It's fantastic. They usually sell treats halfway through. You're there with your community. I highly recommend, if anyone is interested, to think about running for town meeting. What you need to do to pull papers. Okay, so today is December 6th. Today, papers are able to be pulled at Town Hall starting today. So if you're going to run for a town-wide board, you need to get 50 signatures. Sounds like a lot. It's very doable. You ask people outside of Roach Brothers, you ask your friends. Town meeting, you actually only need 10. And they do need to be in your precinct. So that's going to be people who live around you, your neighbors, your friends. And that's what you're doing. And just briefly, I'm going to give you the dates. So you go to the new town hall, or the temporary town hall, rather, which is at 888 Worcester Street, Suite 140, between 8 and 4 p.m. from today until January 11th. And that is when you get the papers from our town clerk, Casey Cato. You have to just return them to her by January 16th at 5 p.m. That is if you're going for a town-wide position. If you're a town meeting member, they give you 10 extra days. You can pull papers up and through the 26th of January, and they're not due until the 30th. So that's just a little brief overview of the pulling of the papers to sort of put a little clarity on what could seem confusing. And then, as you'll notice from the presentation that we have here, takes you right up through the election, which is March 5th. Okay. I'm not going to get too deeply into the campaign right now, because what I really want to do is get to our panel. And I do think they're going to be touching about this a little bit. We're going to ask them a few questions, if they could brief us in their presentation, and then we'll also be taking questions. So first, I want to introduce Miss Christina Horner. She is currently a member of the Wellesley School Committee. She is a Boston native. She was a Weston Metco student. She was an educator in Weston. She was the director of the Lincoln Metco, co-president of WOW. I could go on and on. So clearly, Christina was an outstanding candidate for school committee, and she won for school committee. But what I'd love you to do, Christina, is just tell us a little bit about why you decided to run, your thoughts on how you accomplished it, however you want to share, and then if you also just want to even say anything about town meeting, because you run both a precinct campaign and a townwide campaign.
Okay, so remind me of the following 2 questions. But for the first question, in terms of why I decided to run, let me think. I had been approached a few times, and this time it felt very important. We came from a very difficult time internationally. I felt like there was so much divisiveness in terms of education in schools, and there was a lot of misunderstanding around CRT, and just too many distractions that were in play. And I believe that not only were the children suffering, but I believe the entire community was suffering. And so I felt as if I didn't use my expertise that I've gained over the years, that I was actually wasting it, and I felt as if it was really time for me to step up to the plate. So often a lot of us say that we don't have the time, or we don't have the support, and the reality is that we all can do something, and it was just obvious to me that my time was now.
Christina, thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, what I'd love to help the audience understand, because I think this is the part that can be tricky. Clearly, you're an educator and you have a passion, so we can see why you're a good fit for the school committee. But how do you run a school committee campaign? You know, how big does it need to be? Do you need to know many people in town? Sort of help break it down for us, if you could.
Okay, gladly. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing, but what was great was that it was astounding to me how much support from places I would have never imagined were there, and I just started asking questions. I felt as if the League of Women Voters, these types of forums were very, very helpful. I'm a member, but also it was just very clear, even if you weren't a member, that there were so many resources and knowledge and expertise within the organization that they would be more than happy to help you out. I also just started talking to other elected officials. And so I spoke to members of the select board. I spoke to current members of the school committee. And this was before I even decided to run. So actually doing that homework to see, well, what is it that you do? What are the best things? And trying to approach it from an asset-based mentality. I didn't want the dirt just yet. And so, you know, what do you like about running? The same question you just asked me. What is your why? And so really trying to understand, in terms of understanding their why, it would make the what and how they were doing what they were doing so much clearer. And then from there, just starting to ask people, okay, what would you suggest I do? What are the next steps? And every person you spoke to had a different opinion in terms of the next steps. But what was very clear is, regardless of who I spoke with, just start having the conversations with people. And so that's first and foremost, and you'd really be surprised at how open I feel and that I experience our elected officials are throughout the community. I even contacted the superintendent. I spoke to teachers, and I just took it from there. And then, most importantly, everyone kept saying, pull the papers, and that was the one thing I think people had in common. Get busy, pull your papers.
So, Christina, you mentioned the dirt.
Yes, dirt, yeah.
We all know school committee is very busy. Are you out 7 nights a week, 9 months a year? I'm not asking you to sugarcoat anything, but as realistic as possible, could you share what level of time commitment you feel that you have embarked upon for, let us note, a 3-year commitment?
The time commitment was a huge, huge concern because I'm a full-time mother with 3 kids who are all in school, and then also I work full-time. And so full-time now isn't like 35 hours. Sometimes my job can be 50, 60, and I do travel, so that was a huge piece. I am not the only person on the Wellesley School Committee who has a job. And so with anything, it's about balancing. And balance in my life is very important in terms of my faith, my family, my job, and then also this job as school committee member. And so it can be done. If you work, it can be done. A lot of people think that it can't. And the reality is you have to be well aware of your limitations and also, more importantly, able to set clear boundaries. You can't do everything. And so in terms of the time it takes with school committee, we usually have meetings every 2 weeks, and then we also have what we call bonus meetings. And now it's not a bonus in terms of, you know, a cash payment, but it's like, oh, voila, you know, you get to have another meeting on another Tuesday. And so sometimes, you know, we find we have to make that sacrifice to get the work done because there is a lot of work. And so that's the dirt. You know, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Sometimes there are meetings that come up that you really have to do. And if it's really a hot button topic, it's going to happen. You're going to have a lot of bonus meetings. And so now this year, this is my first time starting the school year in September because I was just elected in March. But last academic school year, it was pretty contentious in terms of the teacher contracts, so it involved a lot of meetings. And those bonus meetings weren't just on Tuesdays. Sometimes those bonus meetings were in the parking lot as I was about to go to a different event. Sometimes the bonus meetings were early in the morning before I was going to another meeting. And so it really depends on the issues, but I do find that it's manageable. And the best piece about it is that, in my opinion, is that we came together and we resolved an issue that was pretty contentious in town, and it made a difference for our kids and for our faculty so that people felt like they were valued.
Well, that's amazing. What I'd like to do, if this is okay with the panel, I'm going to introduce our second speaker, ask a series of questions as I did to you, Christina. Then we'll introduce our third speaker. Then what I'd love to do is open it up for questions from the audience who might want to direct it to any of our speakers. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Michael DiRotenzio, who has one of my favorite, what do they call it for superheroes? Origin story, who became active in Wellesley town government while in high school. And I'm showing from your data that was 2010. I won't ask you how old you were in 2010. So in addition to being a current member of the NRC, the Natural Resource Commission, Michael is also a past member of the school committee, the Playing Fields Task Force, and Sustainable Wellesley. Now he's currently practicing municipal law in addition to serving on the NRC. So Michael, feel free to talk about whatever you want, but I'd love for you to briefly fill us in both on how you decided to run, if you could speak maybe briefly to your town meeting experience while you were young, because I don't know if the high schoolers in our town realize that they can have such a role, and we know how strong and smart they are. And then just a little bit about of the structure of either your campaign or how things are going on NRC, just to give the audience a flavor for what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jen, for having me, and good evening, everyone. Sorry to be a little bit late on the train coming back, but I was so excited when Jen invited us to join tonight and to talk a little bit about what it's like to be in town government and hopefully inspire either people here or people watching on Wellesley Media. Thank you, Luke, to run for office in the upcoming March 5th election, which will be here before we know it. So I may just talk a little bit briefly about the NRC and the school committee. I'm sure you've heard about that from Christina already. And then I can talk a little bit about town meeting, and we can answer as many questions as folks have. One of the great things about Wellesley is how easy it is to get involved. There are literally hundreds of positions. All of them need filling, and many of them require no experience whatsoever. I think for all of us, Christina, of course, had professional experience in education, but I did not when I was first on the school committee. I don't know, Jeff, if you had professional public works experience when you...
They won't even let me near the snowplow.
So this is something that's open to anyone, and I think if there's a message that I'd want to get across, and I'm probably all three of us, is that please run. Don't feel like there's an expectation or people you need to know or a degree that you need to have. This really is open to everyone. It's the beauty of having a very decentralized, classic New England town government. There are also downsides to that, but I'm going to focus on the beauty of that for this session to encourage people to run. The NRC is a really interesting board. That's what I'm serving on right now. It is, in fact, the only one in the state. Concord also has an NRC, but it's appointed, doesn't quite have the same role. So Wellesley, you will find, if you get involved, has many one-off things that exist only in Wellesley. We have an executive director of general government services as our chief operating or administrative officer. That doesn't exist elsewhere. And some of the ways that we structure our government are fairly unique. And I share that to say that, again, what that means is there's a lot of roles. There's a lot of ways to get involved, whether it's a topic-based committee, and that could be an elected board, which we're talking about tonight, schools, public works, and municipal light plant, natural resources. Could also be an appointed board. If you're not interested in running for office this year, reach out to one of the three of us or to anyone that you know in town government. There are tons of appointed roles that are also topic-based. On the NRC, we appoint a very active Trails Committee, which does a wonderful job maintaining the trail map houses that you see, establishing new trails, working on those, that we appoint folks to. We also have other appointments we make around wetlands and some other works, and that's true also of the schools, which have many volunteer roles, and the municipal light plant and the public works board that Jeff serves on. On the NRC right now, we've got some great projects. One I just want to highlight is, well, let me highlight two. One is at Simons Park, which is that sort of open space next to the library, which is usually empty. There is a whole bunch of work that was done there over the fall. Right now it looks a little bland. It looks like somebody just sort of raked some of the dirt up. But in the spring, it's going to be a big pollinator garden. And so what we're trying to do is show off to the town an initiative of what it can look like not to have mowed grass, right? That's sort of the primary default lawn care that we have in most homes in Wellesley, and that's perfectly fine. But what we want to show is an alternative for folks who may be interested in a different type of lawn care. And so the NRC and our great staff, led by Brandon Schmidt, our director, took on this initiative, found a grant to help fund it, and the Public Works Department was critical. One of the things you're going to hear is how much all of the boards, committees, departments work together. It's the only way anything gets done. And so the Public Works Department was critical in allowing this to happen. So hopefully in the spring, you are going to see a huge, beautiful garden with all sorts of butterflies and birds and flowers. And you'll drive by on Washington Street and you'll think, huh, what's that? I wonder how I can put that in my lawn. And then you'll read the sign, you'll call the NRC, and we will tell you exactly how you can do that. So one of the concepts being that if we want people to buy in to new and more environmental practices, we have to create a showcase and give a chance for people to see it. So I'm really excited about that project. Another project we have going on is a land conservation plan that we're developing. That's taking a look at all of the open space in Wellesley, and Wellesley has less open space, and of that open space, less protected open space than its peer towns, and thinking about what are strategies to preserve that. One of the ideas I'm trying to circulate is sort of downzoning forests to protect the intact forest we have, and upzoning developed parking lots that may be a good place for housing. And being on the NRC is a chance to explore those ideas, to put them into action, to have conversation with people. And that's one of, I think, the most exciting things. You as an individual board member in our structure in Wellesley are really not all that relevant, right? The boards only take action in majorities. And so part of what being in Wellesley government forces you to do is think about a creative idea, try to come up with a reason you're running for office, right? You have to give voters a reason to vote for you. But you also have to convince your colleagues to agree with you. Because if you don't, your idea is not going to go anywhere. This is not a mayoral setup. This is not a setup where one person is making the decisions. And so it is incumbent upon everybody involved to build a team and do it the Wellesley way, as we will say. That can sometimes take 10 to 20 years, but to do it the Wellesley way and to build a coalition. And that's been, it's been really fun for me to be able to do that over the years. So why don't I stop there? I'm happy to talk a little bit about town meeting afterwards, but I don't want to go on too long and let my distinguished colleagues have a chance to speak as well.
Well, that'd be great. Thank you so much. And I don't know if you're able to get this on camera. I'm going to try to see. But Michael just made a great point. I don't think you can. But this is the Wellesley form of government. And, I mean, if you're looking at this, you think, oh, it looks complicated. I mean, it is complicated. But it also is allowing many people in the town to get involved and to make a difference. So I just wanted to highlight this beautiful sign, thanks to Casey Cato. All right. Now, I'd like to introduce our third speaker. And Jeff Wessler, who I got to know when our kids were at Sprague together. Then I saw him at a town meeting. And then I saw him when I served on advisory, which is another appointed board. And I realized that, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, you're on your third tour of duty at the Board of Public Works. Your background says that you're a fractional executive. To be honest, I'm not sure what that is, but you've got a background in budgets and forecasts, helping build companies, design systems and processes that are necessary for them to thrive. So I would love if you could maybe share about your board, what made you want to join your board, and any thoughts you might have for someone who would say, I like Public Works. We love the RDF. We love how our snow is plowed so beautifully.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's easy to be on a third tour when you work with wonderful people both on other boards in town, but really in particular at Public Works and at the light plant. So there's 3 members on the Public Works board. Those 3 members of Public Works serve as 3 of the 5 members of the light plant board, and then there's 2 appointed members on the light plant board. But the staff and the directors in particular, they make it, I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have signed up a second and third time if they didn't make it rewarding. And to carry on part of what Michael said also, we do act as a board. The work, the day-to-day work that keeps our town beautiful and keeps our town running is done by the staff. And we rely heavily on them, and which is why if you watch any of these meetings, what you'll hear over the last few years in particular is how much our boards are focused on attracting and retaining the right people to work in town. It's probably, if not the largest, one of the largest issues we've had over the last few years is we have great people that we want to keep, and we want more great people to come here. So anyone's participation on these boards, if there's nothing else you can do, being the person that's sitting here as a board saying we need to get the right people here working in town and keeping them is creating tremendous value for our town and for all of us, for our properties, for our kids, for our schools, for everything. That includes the teachers, right? Teachers, we want teachers that want to be here with our kids, that want to know that they're supported by wonderful board members. So that makes it rewarding. I think Pete Buttigieg, and I hope I said that correctly, I think that's the right way to say his name, he kind of stole my thunder. Like, infrastructure's cool. Like, I mean, it blew my mind, right? I was doing this before he was running for president, and I'm like, it's cool that, like, somebody that was a mayor and was, like, focusing on potholes, like, walk around town talking about potholes and snow plowing, could end up running for president. Not that I'm planning on running for president, but I'm like, that's cool. So, but it's what makes everything tick. So to me, like, the energy, I mean, I have visions, those of you who've ever talked to me about what we do at the light plant, like, I have visions. I wanted to call up Elon Musk back when I liked him a little bit better years ago. But I wanted to call him up, and, they make these Tesla batteries, and he was talking about making the solar tiles. I'm like, why don't you we got 10,000 homes in Wellesley. Like, why don't we just set up the whole town as a big experiment and see because we got a local municipal light plant. We got the lines, create the energy in the homes. You can think creatively about what we can do within the boundaries of this town that's good for us, good for the state, good for the planet. And I don't do the day-to-day work. I don't know anything about how we purchase power. I don't know how to drive a snowplow. I don't know. I love that Cricket and everybody on the team is working on this garden. And I can't grow a pollinator garden. I might learn someday. But what I can do is I can look at budgets. I can help them make decisions about how do we set up so that Dave, our director, can go higher, so that Don, the director of the light plant, can retain people. How do I make sure, one of the challenges we have to deal with as a board is the light plant comes to us and they say, because of COVID, there's supply chain issues. I'll tell you that in 2018, when we had to buy a new transformer, we approve large purchases. So they'd come to us, they say, we need to buy some transformers. 6 weeks, 8 weeks. We've ordered transformers that are on a 88-week cycle. I mean, we're having to order things that could take 2 years to get here now. So that's where board members can get involved, is you may have expertise in other walks of life, and you're sitting here as advisors. You're looking over budgets, and you're weighing in, and you're providing support. You're having directors that come to you and say, I'm seeing things happening in other towns. How can we start to talk to other people in the town of Wellesley about maybe things that we can do to actually improve our performance? But what they're always looking for is a second set of eyes, somebody that can support them and go talk to other members of other boards, can go talk to Megan Jopp, Cheryl Struthers, who's in charge of our finances in town, and can essentially be a person that's just facilitating all the connections that need to happen to make that big board actually work that Jen was showing. So I'll stop here to let you ask more questions. But the reason I got involved is, particularly with this, is I think infrastructure is cool. And if you look, I mean, it's the things that make our town work day to day. Is none of the other stuff. We couldn't focus on how our kids get educated if we didn't have clean drinking water, if we didn't have plowed streets for them to traverse over to get to the school. So it just feels really substantial and important. And for me, I always wanted to give back. Literally, part of my origin story is actually Phyllis Tierman. At some point, when I used to commute to downtown Boston, I had been speaking to her, and I said, man, it'd be really nice to get involved. I was taking a train every day, and it was really hard to find the time. The minute I started working from home, 2016, literally one of the first calls I made was I called Phyllis, and I said, Phyllis, point me to some people. How do I get involved? And she connected me with some people from League of Women Voters and around town. And I'll say, I said I was going to stop. I'll say one more thing. I have a different journey. I was not in a contested race. So I didn't have to run a big campaign against somebody, but I still had to get my name out there and talk to people. I had to get 50 signatures at Roche Brothers and at the dump, at the RDF, and getting around town. I had my daughter hold a big sign. If any of you ever signed any of my stuff, there's a rhyme. I should have brought it with me. We made up a whole rhyme thing, and it's help my dad get on the board, something about plowing the streets, but it rhymes. But it's like you can make this a family thing, right? It's like you're not, so it's because it's about being here in town and what you're doing, and your kids get to see, if you're thinking of running, your kids get to see you're modeling being a civic servant. So it's really cool. I feel very proud every day when my kids get to see me doing this. I didn't have to run a contested race, but I started talking to everybody before the election even happened. I wanted to hit the ground running, and I wanted to know what people wanted here in town. And that was the most important thing, is really starting to understand, I'm doing this because I care and I want to give back to the town, so what do people really want? You know, what's the ingredient they need to sit with the people that do the day-to-day work and provide some oversight?
Those were all such great overviews. I have a general question that I know. So in the interest of full disclosure, I did run for town meeting in 2016. I had no money, so I made my own postcards, and I walked up and down every street in Precinct H, and I dropped them in people's houses. And I won.
Can I say, by the way, I'm sorry, Precinct H, I'm in Precinct H. It is harder. I ran 3 or 4 times before I got elected in Precinct H. I ran once uncontested to get on board of Public Works. So I just want to say, if you live in Precinct H, assume you got to run 4 or 5 times before you get elected. It's hard.
No, I love it. I love it. And then, to be honest, I ran for the select board, and I lost. So before I made both decisions, and this is the question I'm going to pose to you guys, this is what ran through my head. And feel free to answer either about the town meeting or your other board. Do I have to have hundreds of friends in Wellesley? Do I have to be independently wealthy? Do I have to have coffees every week? Do I have to have a website? You know, these are the questions that were stopping me from wanting to move forward. And I would love any insights you would share to people in the audience who are maybe thinking, I'm new to town. I'm not a Wellesleyite. I'm not wealthy. Those all seem like barriers. And I know I overcame, and I'd love to get your insights on how you overcame those. Maybe Christina, since you spoke first, if you could start again.
Right. I'm an educator, and so is my husband, so we definitely are not wealthy. You know, we are rich with love, but not money. And so, you know, in starting the race, you know, we had 0. And so, in fact, you know, my mother-in-law contributed. She used my Christmas gift, my normal Christmas gift, and she contributed to the campaign. And while I was very appreciative, I was like, well, what about me? But you'd be surprised by, you know, the donations people will make, people that you've never met who might hear about you from somewhere else, and those little donations are big because little donations become big donations. And in terms of a website, I didn't know anything about designing a website, but my campaign, it started off with probably 3 people, and then a member of the committee would invite another person, and then that person would invite another person, and everyone had unique gifts, and it was just a matter of capitalizing on the different gifts that people had. Everyone had something. And so it might be someone doing the proofreading. And I know I had a friend who, God bless her, she tried to do the website. And then with my committee, they were very kind, but they said, no. And then someone took it over. And so, you know, there are just so many talents. And most of the people who were on my campaign who ran it, I had never met them before, but it was through the campaign, having a shared vision, that I can say we honestly became friends and really trusted the judgment of one another and what can you do? And everyone has a strength. And so, you know, it's the teacher in me. You know, it was really an asset-based approach to getting the job done, and it was truly about engaging the community in an equitable way so that we can do this together. So that's basically how our campaign, and trust me, like I had no money, and then we did end up, we were surprised by the amount of donations people actually made. And so what we did as a committee, we turned around and took a vote. What are we going to do with these extra funds? And then we turned around, we donated them back to the community. And so the money will come. The money, if people really buy into your vision, the money will come.
Christina, that was beautiful. Michael, could you give us your take on that question?
Well, I think it'll be hard to top what Christina said, which I want to echo entirely. And I think one of the things to think about as well is from a time perspective, because one of the things that I have found most challenging, particularly on the school committee, less so on the NRC, but if you're going to run for school committee or select board, which are really the most intensive town-wide roles, it is a significant amount of time. And so I entirely agree with Christina that if you are putting together a good campaign, I think people will be willing to invest in it, and that is what you will see happen. So, you know, money hopefully won't be as much of a barrier, but running the campaign takes time. It takes shoe leather, and then serving on the board takes time, and the expectations in Wellesley are fairly high, and that's not a bad thing, but it means that you have to be prepared to put the time into it. And I would say that that's probably, you know, the idea that time is the only truly finite commodity in any of our lives. That is very true here as well. And so if you are thinking about running for office, that to me would be the first thing to think through. I think the rest of it, it can seem daunting at first, of websites and fundraising and collecting signatures, but the mechanics of it usually have a way of working themselves out. The one thing you have to make sure you have time for is time to devote to the role.
I think that's a great answer, and I want to just echo that the hard work that some of my fellow League of Women Voters have done with the candidate handbook has so many components, and I wish I had known about that when I had run, because it even has the links to the treasurer's report that you have to fill out if you do collect any money. So it's a great resource. Again, it's on the homepage of our website. Jeff, love to hear your input on this angle.
First of all, sign my sheet for my dad to be on the board that plows my street. I remember the run. So, finally came to me. It's, you know, I'm fortunate, and I'm on the flip side. So I would say it's probably a 50-50 split in town, right? So school committee, there's usually, even if it's not contested, there's usually an expectation that you're running a campaign. For whatever reason, Public Works is one of those roles where it's not usually contested. And I've been fortunate in the last several elections, because I was already on the board of Public Works, I didn't have to campaign much for Precinct H, because people now know me. So it made it easier. But I remember back when I started, at the beginning, you know, the first time I ran for town meeting, I wasn't on anything. And I sent out postcards. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to say, what colors to choose, how to lay it out. Back then I was like, I don't know if people are going to look at a website. And I tried to do it without doing but I didn't even raise money. I was like, I'm not going to ask people for money. But I wanted to say this because I felt guilty. I'm like, what? Why would I ask people for money? So I don't know if that's a common thing, but I know for a lot of people, like, especially as you said, like a lot of these are people you didn't know. It feels a little weird to ask people for money. It's like, I want to do this thing, but I need some money to do it. And you may not know me that well, but hey, trust me. Can you write a check? It feels a little awkward, so it's scary. But Christina, what you said is beautiful. people care about what happens in town, and they truly appreciate when anybody that is qualified and willing gets up and says, I really want to help, and they will put their money behind you. And they want to know what you think, and they want to know, they want to make a choice about who they support, but they will support. So I haven't had to raise funds myself, but I've been around long enough to see many people do it. And I see how the voters, how the town responds to it, and it really is, it's a beautiful thing to see how much people care about town and how much time they invest, even when they're not the ones running or the ones serving on the boards. So please, if you're afraid, anybody thinking of running, don't be afraid, and then go back and rewatch what Christina said. So.
Okay, what I'd love to do now is to open this up for questions from the audience, whether you have a more general, how do I get away from the fear, or a technical question. Unfortunately, Casey Cato had another conflict, but if there's any questions that are town clerk, I will get the answers to you tomorrow. So I've got the mic here. Is there anyone who has a question we could direct to any of our panel? All right. I'm just going to hand this over to you, and you.
I'm just curious because I've seen it done. My name's Ari Johnson, and I live in Precinct D. The advantages or disadvantages of running your own campaign versus getting your first volunteer to become your campaign manager.
That's a great question. Even, did you even know you could have a campaign manager? Did you think you had to have one and didn't have a bestie who would do it for you? It's such a great question.
I think the answer is yes, accept help. When someone wants to assist, be grateful and try to build from there. And I think I felt a little bit as Jeff does, people thinking, why would anybody sort of waste their time trying to get me, on the ballot or any of that sort of thing. The reality is you can't do this alone. It's a team effort, and it goes back to the whole structure of town government behind me. The whole thing is a team effort, right? And so building your team and being okay leading that team is a key part of being a candidate. And so it's the same thing where it's awkward to ask for money, but making the ask, right, is something that you have to do. And as Christina said, if you are putting forward ideas, you're having a substantive reason that you want to run, usually people will buy into that. They'll want to support you. And you can't do it alone, so having a team makes a big difference. I'll also say from a town meeting perspective, there are no campaign finance requirements for town meeting like there are for town-wide positions. So, if somebody's on the fence thinking, I don't want to get into the whole thing, it's very easy to run for town meeting. You can raise money and spend money, and you do not have to report it. You don't have to worry about it. So from a town meeting perspective, it's a really great place to start as an entry place. If you're running town-wide, you have more finance reporting requirements, and it's helpful to have a team behind you.
I'll also chime in. One of the things I was told repeatedly after speaking with different members of the community who were already in elected roles, that if I was going to run for school committee, it was imperative that I have a campaign manager. And so I was really blessed in that I had an amazing campaign manager who I don't think I could have done it without her as well as the team. And so and I would pass that information along. If you're running for school committee or if you're running possibly for select board, you really do need a campaign manager. And then who that's going to be, you might get a few no's before you get a yes, but it's always, I tell my kids this, it's always a no until you ask. And then also what will happen sometimes as you're asking for advice from different members of the boards throughout town, they will also make referrals. And when people hear about your message, they will be more than happy, have you considered Jane Doe or Susie Smith, or I will ask. And so people will actually do that for you.
What they said. So it's, Yeah, you know, I've had members of my board that have been contested, and I will say they started very early on that process of getting people to help them. And yeah, and no matter if you're new to it or if you've been around the town and involved for a long time, you just have to ask people, and you're going to get some no's, and then you're going to get some wonderful people that say yes, and I'd love to help. And sometimes I hear that sometimes people you don't ask will show up and say, I want to help you, unexpectedly, or you may not know them, but they'll hear about you through other people and want to get involved. So the point that Michael said is just make sure your ideas are getting out there and make sure you ask everybody you can, and that'll serve you well.
Let's see. Okay, great. We've got another question here.
I believe my precinct has around 30 town meeting members. Do they spend time together? Do they hear from the residents? What type of dynamic goes on there?
Yeah, no, I'll start. It's interesting. I get a lot of feedback because of my townwide role. I rarely, I don't, so I know many of the people in Precinct H, that the 29 other members, largely either I've met them through town meeting or I've seen them involved in other things around town, other issues, but we don't meet separately. We don't caucus as separate precincts, so you don't have precinct-wide meet. At least Precinct H doesn't. I don't. But there's no formal caucusing of precincts where they sit and they discuss issues for their precinct. It's an interesting idea. Yes, and I know that some precincts have struggled in the past to even fill the 30 seats. And a lot of that has to do with, I won't call it the fatal flaw. One of the big challenges in town is I always hear that there are more people that are interested than can find the time to do it. And I felt like I was one of those people. When I was commuting to downtown Boston, I would get home at 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 at night. That had to change for me to be able to get involved. Which is why you tend to see, a lot of the people that are involved, town meeting also, are people that are either retired, semi-retired, or have something that allows them a little more flexibility. And that's a real limitation on participation. On the flip side, it would be great if that when you're involved, you had things like precinct-wide caucusing and meetings, because I don't always know what's most important. I can guarantee there's more going on in the precinct that people care deeply about that I don't know than I do. And the things that I do know usually come out, like I know there's some people that have flooding issues in my precinct, but I'm aware of that because they come to the Department of Public Works and there's something happening to help them through that. I don't know, I'm not sure that would have happened or I would have been aware of that just as a town meeting member. But the good news is that our townwide boards, I think, do get a lot of feedback from residents routinely. And when you have special projects, I know things going on right now, but I remember when we did streetlights, put in new streetlights, we had a ton of feedback. When we were leasing out some of the telephone poles around town to put in better coverage for some of the cellular service, we got a ton of feedback. So there's always a lot of feedback at the townwide level. Precinct level, it's a little different.
Michael, maybe now might be a great time, if you wouldn't mind, to talk to us about what made you decide to run for town meeting in 2010, as you were not a lawyer then. You were, you didn't have a high-powered job and no,
School degree.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for the question. And first, let me just pick up on Marguerite's question, and then I'll turn to that, because I think it's a very good one. And in what I do for work now, I've really enjoyed seeing how other towns operate, right? And there are 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and really 351 different ways of doing things. And there are some towns like Brookline and Lexington that are also town meeting towns that have very active town meeting member associations. And so that's sort of a nonprofit group that fosters meeting. They may run a listserv. They may do some social gatherings. I think that could be something that would be great for Wellesley if we had an opportunity to start something like that. I think it seems to work very well in Brookline and Lexington, so I think that's an opportunity for improvement. It's a great question. In terms of what motivated me to get involved all these years ago, and I think it was like 13 years ago, which is hard to believe, but one of the unique things about Wellesley, so you heard me say before some only in Wellesley things. Another only in Wellesley thing is that we allow people who are not U.S. citizens, are not 18, to run for many of our offices, which is a fairly unique setup, and I'm not aware of anywhere else that that has that. And so, so when I was in high school, I was interested in being on town meeting. Of course, that was when the new high school was being built. There were lots of decisions around what my high school experience was going to look like, and these might be decisions like, would we have a place to park? So they might not have been a very important one in retrospect, but at the time for a high school student, right, those are things that were important. And I had been in town a while. My dad grew up here. My grandfather immigrated here, and so it was a place that, like Jeff, like Christina, I felt like I wanted to give back. And so a little legal research at the time and some help from Kathy Nagel, who was our wonderful past town clerk, who KC has succeeded. We determined that there was not, in fact, a minimum age requirement to run for town meeting. Most towns, the legislation that establishes town meeting will say registered voters shall elect registered voters, right? And Wellesley, for whatever reason, I don't know why it was drafted like this in 1932, Chapter 202 of the Acts of 1932, if anyone wants to look it up, it says registered voters shall elect residents. And so my argument at the time was, I am a resident. I am only 16, but I do live here and go to school here. And for whatever reason, at Town Hall, they said, okay, we're gonna buy your argument. And they let me get my 10 signatures and get in the ballot. And I've been kicking around ever since. So it's really was a wonderful experience at the time, and we've had a number of people afterwards who have been in high school, occasionally in middle school, but people who are really the chief consumers of the town's budget, right? The school system, as Christina knows, is the chief recipient of tax dollars. More than 50%, probably up to 75% of your tax dollars go to support the public schools in one way or another. And so one of the great things in Wellesley is that you can be less than 18, you can run for town meeting. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen. You can run for town meeting and for certain town-wide boards. KC has the specifics on that. I believe it's posted on the town website. But another only in Wellesley thing that I think makes it very easy for people to run for office where they couldn't in neighboring towns, and I always want to encourage people to take advantage of that, and it really warms my heart when I see young people and non-U.S. citizens who are willing to put their name forward and serve, because we all live here together, right? We're all trying to make the town a better place.
Thanks for highlighting that. Actually, in the presentation that we did at the beginning, Casey does have
great.
those notes. So it'll be on the homepage of the League of Women Voters website. I think we had another question here. Oh, it was answered. Lovely. Well, I have a question here that was written down and given to me earlier. And I love this question because there's 240 town meeting seats. There's not as many of our nighttime government boards. And someone, I want to try to phrase it correctly, they're saying, I'd like to run for town meeting, but I feel like I don't know enough. I don't have an agenda. I don't have knowledge like a school committee member is. Is it okay to run for town meeting and listen and make a decision upon the data that I'm hearing?
I would say yes, and that listening actively is probably the most important aspect of being a town meeting member. That's it.
Yeah, the beauty of it being, if you've ever watched town meeting, the beauty of it being 240 people is that we don't want 240 people that think, do, or have the same think or do the same or have the same experiences. It's the combination of different backgrounds and experiences. So you may feel like you don't know a lot or don't have a lot of experience or aren't educated in all the nuances of Wellesley-specific things. But you probably have a perspective that's going to be really valuable in the midst of a body of 240 people, and we need that. We don't want to be a town led by the word in my head is mono, not like monoculture. Yeah, but diversity. Diversity is key to us making smart decisions about the future of our town. And so there's 240 seats, and if everybody had 240 different opinions, might take a while. Might not be the 4 to 6 nights that you said earlier, but we probably end up with good decisions. So,
echo that entirely. And I think the idea of the New England Town Meeting is very much to be a citizen legislature, right? And in most places in New England, that's what it is. Literally every registered voter has a vote in town meeting. And in Wellesley, because we have grown to be a larger town, now at 30,000 people, not everybody has a vote. You can run to be one of the 240 people who has a vote, but it is purposefully large for just the reasons that were articulated, because it's intended to be a wide diversity of ranges, backgrounds, ideas, perspectives. It's not intended to be a small operation where decisions can be made quickly. Those are trade-offs, right? But one of the great things is there is no expectation that you know anything coming into town meeting. The only expectation is you are a citizen, or in Wellesley, a resident who wants to give back and be involved.
Well, I love those answers. Some of my previous towns were open town meetings where I would just sit and listen. And I really like this question because those were my concerns. And I always like to say I don't live in the black or the white, I live in the gray. So I'm glad to hear I'm doing it okay, hopefully, at town meeting, because I go and I read and I listen and I ask questions and I make a decision, best based upon what I think is best. I do love Marguerite's question, though, because something I just want to highlight, I think sometimes people wonder, are you voting for yourself or you're voting for your constituents? And often you don't know what your constituents are thinking, but I do want to share that now we have electronic voting, and you are able to see how your town meeting members are voting. So if anyone's interested in learning that, you can look to see. So that could maybe help. Now, people tend to send out postcards and they highlight the issues and desires that are important to them. So you usually do get a bit of a flavor as to the person that you're electing. But I just think these are great questions because I think school committee, all of your boards, for instance, people understand a bit more. It's a lot of work, but they kind of know the lane you're in. Town meeting seems a bit more amorphous. So I really appreciate that you guys are speaking both to your specific board as well as the overall town government. I just want to see if there's any questions left. And if there's not, I would just love, and you guys feel free, I'd love for you just to be able to make any statement you want, any cheerleading or anything like that. And then after, let's go in the same order if we don't mind. And then after we speak, we're just going to have our wonderful president, Bonnie Nathan, come up just to close our event tonight. So I want to thank everyone for attending. I especially want to thank our panelists for giving up another nighttime government evening slot because you're out a lot. If we could go Christina, Michael, Jeff, we'll go to Bonnie, and then we're going to say thank you to Wellesley Media and the Warren Building.
All right, and so I'm thinking more specifically of a coffee that I had where it was probably the most racially, ethnically, linguistically diverse group that I had met my entire decades living here in Wellesley, and you were there at that meeting. We had a blast. We had a blast. And so it was at that meeting that so many women I identified with who worked and who were racially, ethnically different from the vast majority of our community. And they had a sincere interest in learning more about this process, learning more, wanting to be more involved, but not knowing how. And I would just challenge our entire community to realize that in terms of when we talk about diversity, it's really about the whole human experience. A lot of times people only think race, but what a better community we would be if we were intentionally reaching out to our various groups who are not involved and feel that they don't have a voice but want to contribute. And so as we enter into this next cycle of the elections, I just want to encourage whoever's listening, you can do it. Just reach out for help. And for those of us who actually have positions where we're elected officials, it's time for us to step up to the plate and help others who have not had a seat at the table.
Absolutely. And I'm sure all three of us, if anybody ever wants to reach out to any of us individually, if you're watching this on Wellesley Media, would be happy to talk to anybody who's interested in running or wants to know more about town government, and our contact info are on the town website for all of us. One thing I might make a pitch for running for office, and this is perhaps a self-interested pitch, is I have met so many wonderful people and made so many wonderful friends who I would never have known in my life in Wellesley otherwise, right? And so, you know, the people that I met when I was in high school, then during my time in the school committee, and now in the NRC, are people I have either kept in touch with since those times or will keep in touch with as my life goes on. And it's been such a wonderful and rewarding part of serving in town government. I think sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't know enough people, I'm not heavily involved, I haven't been going to meetings. You will meet people, you will get involved, it will all come together, and in fact, that's, at least for me, been one of the most wonderful parts of serving in town government. And I think you'll be surprised if you're thinking about this and you choose to run. I think you'll be surprised how quickly you meet new people who really become your close friends in town and for years to come. So I hope anybody watching this chooses to step up and pull papers. Thank you for having me.
First of all, it's really hard going after the two of them. So, again, but you're both amazing, both in what you're speaking and what you're sharing with everybody, but also just having the chance to collaborate with both of you over time. It's fantastic. First, thank you to League of Women Voters. I'm always reminded at events like this, and on the board or on the slide you had in February, the candidates night that you'll be running. There is nothing else. It's actually always interesting. I was like, why is it League of Women Voters and nobody else that runs things like this? But you'll notice it has a tremendous impact in town. League of Women Voters is the thing in town that keeps people aware of how to get involved, what's going on, and make sure that people have a way to participate and feel closer to the boards and town meeting members that represent them. So thank you for that to all of you. Second of all, you're not getting out of here without me thanking you, Miss Moderator, for your participation. And in particular, you know, when you're on a board, you present to advisory. So you asked some good questions. So and if anyone has questions about that, because advisory I know is often looking for people to participate, but that's another thing where Ms. Fallon is your go-to if you have questions about that. But
I even did an extra year.
Yeah,
we had some people move out of town. No, you're very kind. But yes, advisory is a wonderful board, and thank you for your kind words.
Yeah,
but it would be nothing without the panelists. You guys were amazing. Sorry, I stepped on your...
No, so it's, but there are a lot of different things. So, but like advisory is, you get to essentially, I just presented last week our budget for public works. We presented to advisory, so advisory can spend the next 4.5, 5 months thinking about, do these folks know what they're doing? Does it make any sense? And should we tell all those town meeting members that they should support them? That's a really vital role in town. It's a second level of someone looking at what independent boards are doing in departments and saying to the town meeting members, doing some real digging and saying, this is what's going on. So I just want to thank Jen, but she's also just really representative. We have, how many members is it on advisory every year?
15. 5 turnover each year.
Every year.
Another 3-year term.
And they do a lot of work to really hold everything together here in town. So thank you for that. So to everybody that's thinking of running, I would just say, or has ever thought about it, the thing that keeps me going in now my 8th year, beginning of my 8th year, is it's my chance to give back. We all do it different ways. You know, I look at people who do a ton of charity work and seem to be involved in, and I say, how do they have the time to do that? This is what I do. We can't all be everywhere at once, but if you've ever felt inclined to be involved in what the community does, how we invest our time and our money, the resources that we allocate, how we plan for the future, how we make sure that Wellesley is as wonderful as we want it to be for generations, this is your chance. We need people to get involved, and you got to take that first step, which is raise your hand and just say, yeah, I want to do it. And as Michael said, there are a lot of us here that'll support you, answer any questions, help you out, give you advice. So please, please get involved. The more the merrier.
Thank you for those wrap-ups. I said I wasn't going to speak anymore, but you just reminded me someone that I need to be grateful to, the group of the staff that we have in town. I think when I think back to my town and advisory, we were working with the most amazing staff. So we would be considered, for instance, at advisory, again, the nighttime government, I love that, but we are working with this amazing staff who works on all facets of our town. When I would talk to Dave Cohen asking him if the snow's going to come, and he's telling me about the snow plows he's coming. But so you did such a nice job thanking the league and myself. I really want to just put this out there to working with the staff. They are a delight. We have the best people working for our town. And then we also have the best people not working for our town, who are volunteering for our town. So I want to thank you so much. And I just wanted Bonnie Northern, our wonderful league president, to be able to just end off the night. But again, thank you to everyone for coming. Everything you need will be on the homepage of the League of Women Voter website of Wellesley. This presentation will be pushed out so many different places. You guys will be movie stars. You're going to go viral. And
Thank you, Jen. Dave, I love the way you said it. League of Women Voters, we are it. I'm Bonnie Northern. I grew up in Wellesley, came here when I was in 3rd grade at Fisk, and I am loving being back home. You too can love being back home and getting involved by being part of the League of Women Voters. League of Women Voters isn't just for women. Everyone can join, everyone can have a part. We do talk about the nighttime government, which I love that. League of Women Voters, Dave said it, we are everywhere. We are daytime, nighttime. Please come and join us. Our board meetings are open to everyone. We are the 2nd Tuesday of every month here in the Warren Building. We welcome all new members, and I also want to acknowledge Lucy Costa, who helped Jen Fallon. If you have any questions, give us a call. You'll find our phone number on the website, and you'll be able to contact us in any way. Thank you.